Good day. This is Dimitri Lascaris coming to you from Kalamat Degrees for Reason to Resist on October 12th, 2025. And today we're very pleased to be joined by Dr. Setareh Sadeqi Mohammadi. Dr. Mohammadi is an assistant professor at the Faculty of World Studies, University of Tehran. She holds a Ph.D. in North American Studies, and her research focuses on U.S.-Iran relations, sanctions, media narratives, and political communication. And she has published on topics including U.S. sanctions, resistant economies, and the rhetoric of the Nation of Islam. Thank you very much for joining us today, Dr. Mohammadi.
Thank you for having me.
Just before we begin, I had the pleasure of meeting you when I was in Tehran in early May of this year. You moderated a panel on which I and a couple of other independent journalists from North America talked about the many failures of our own corporate media here in the West, and I'm gratified that we were able to arrange an interview with you on our show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and it was great to meet you in person here in Iran before the world goes even more crazy and the West goes like an unleashed aggression against Iran.
Yes, it was only several weeks after we met that
exactly
the Israelis and Americans launched their criminal war of aggression on Iran. And I'm going to ask you about that in a moment, but I'd like to begin by talking to you about the so-called peace deal that has been struck by the Palestinian resistance groups and the Israeli regime in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. And I'm just interested in your overall assessment of this deal. Do you think it's a win for the Palestinians? Is it a capitulation? Is it something in between? And what do you expect to happen from here?
I think it's definitely a win for the Palestinians. Imagine a nation with, fractioned pieces of land that has been left to them from the occupation since 1948 and have been resisting with basically they started with resisting with just stones, right? And they weren't heavily armed. They don't have anything comparable to what the Zionist regime has in terms of military capabilities and financial support and the arming and funding that the Israeli regime receives. And yet it was like Israel that wanted a peace deal, and Hamas agreed to it because the genocide that has been going on for 2 years has taken the lives of a very significant number of the population. The famine, the man-made famine or Israeli-made famine that was adding to the suffering of the Palestinians had to come to an end, even if it was by accepting a peace deal, which I think Palestinians and their resistance fighters, the Hamas and like all factions in Palestine know very well that Israel has a long history of breaching so-called ceasefire deals or peace deals. So they're not expecting that everything will just finish and suddenly the next morning you wake up and everything goes back to normal. It's more like getting a chance to take a break from the genocide. I've said this before and I want to repeat it, that the genocide hasn't stopped. The genocide has just only slowed down because the ethnic cleansing has been going on since the occupation started, and the forced migration and evacuation of the people, the forceful taking away of their homes, their lands, their resources, and everything has been going on and is still going on. Israel has no intention to end the occupation, to end the siege of Gaza. And so that's not going to finish. What is happening with the peace deal is just maybe a pause of the accelerated genocide that has been going on for 2 years over ridiculous excuses, and for people to take a break from whatever they have been experiencing. So you see Palestinians celebrating because they see this as a win for a small armed group that has been defending them and still has managed to, stand against the occupying and the usurping regime, and bring about a deal that is going to, at least for a while, decrease the suffering of Palestinians.
Iran saw all too clearly how treacherous and perfidious the Trump and Netanyahu regimes are when it was attacked a few months ago, just days before its negotiators were to meet with American negotiators to discuss Iran's nuclear enrichment program. It was
Exactly.
obviously trying to convey the impression that it was prioritizing negotiation over war, at least at that particular point in time, when in fact it was preparing to launch a criminal war of aggression on Iran. And it's very hard to imagine that these characters can be trusted to keep the deal that they have negotiated with the Palestinian resistance. Do you think, however, that circumstances might have changed now? And I'm particularly curious about your thoughts about global opinion and the pressure that this is putting on the Trump regime, and also to a lesser degree on the Netanyahu regime, to bring the wholesale slaughter of Palestinians to an end. Do you think the circumstances might have changed enough that maybe this time they will respect their agreement? Or do you think there's very little prospect of that happening?
Well, it's very true that the global opinion, and especially because in the global south, you always had the support for Palestine and the understanding of the colonial Zionist project that is going on in Palestine, perpetrated by the Zionist regime and backed by the US and European countries. But in Europe and America, the understanding and the awareness that we're seeing, and the orchestrated, or the amount of public opinion, amount of change that we're seeing in the public opinion in those places is very significant, and that's definitely shaping at least part of what Trump and Netanyahu are considering in coming to negotiate with Hamas. Netanyahu himself is facing pressure from inside the settlements, from the settlers, because there was talk about, the so-called the war captives, so-called hostages that Israel always talks about, and there was pressure from inside settlements to bring an end to this hostages, and to bring an end to them being taken hostage, as they say, by Hamas. And also the IOF soldiers were being killed, and there was pressure on the Israeli soldiers, and so that also helped or shaped part of the public opinion inside the settlements, and pressured Netanyahu to come to a deal with Hamas. But having a significant shift in the public opinion inside the occupied lands and outside of it, in the West in particular, does not change anything about the nature of the Zionist colonial project and its actors. We don't really have any case of Israel abiding by its commitments in peace. Israel has betrayed the US, its main supporter. It has betrayed peace deals with Hamas, with the Palestinian Authority, and it has never adhered to democracy. You mentioned the case of Iran. It was exactly on the eve of the sixth round of talks between Iran and the US, the indirect talk over the nuclear issue, that Israel attacked. And the way we Iranians are perceiving it is that the whole negotiations was a setup for the war. It was not genuine. So there's no way we can actually trust the Zionist regime or even Trump's regime But it might be that because of fearing the public opinion and the pressure that it may bring to the Zionist regime, the current government at least, they might avoid it for a while. But I think it's also important to know that the problem with the Zionist regime, with Israel, is not only Netanyahu. It doesn't mean that like if Netanyahu is no longer in power and we have a new prime minister, suddenly everything is going to be very different. It's not, and it's a problem that has existed since 1948, and it will continue to exist as long as the occupation lasts.
Right. In fact, the one so-called opposition leader in the genocidal entity who seems best positioned to replace Netanyahu one day is Naftali Bennett, who committed heinous war crimes in South Lebanon and once bragged about how many Arabs he had killed. So I think there's plenty of evidence to support your contention that this is a broader problem than just Netanyahu. I think that's abundantly clear. So I'd like to talk to you next about the way this deal came about, and in particular, American journalist Jeremy Scahill, who recently interviewed leaders of the Palestinian resistance, said in a lengthy interview a few days ago on Electronic Intifada that Turkey, Egypt, and to a lesser extent Qatar put enormous pressure on Palestinian resistance groups to accept Trump's so-called peace plan. And I'd like to just show you a clip from Mr. Scahill's interview on Electronic Intifada, where he talked about the pressure applied by these so-called mediators on Palestinian negotiators at Sharm el-Sheikh. And in this clip I'm about to show you, just so you understand the context, Jeremy Scahill begins by talking about the Palestinian response to the 20-point peace plan, which was unveiled in Washington by Trump and Netanyahu on September 30th. And then he explains what happened next. So let's have a listen.
Israel is trying to do is win through this agreement what it has systematically failed to achieve in Gaza, which is forcing the surrender of the Palestinian people. It's not just about Hamas. They are trying to strip the entire population of Palestine of the right to armed resistance. And so what the Palestinians came back with was to say, let's talk about captives, let's talk about aid, let's talk about the genocide, and let's talk about the withdrawal of Israeli forces. All of these other issues need to be deferred, and they need to involve the participation of every political actor within Palestinian society representing a democratic will of the Palestinian people. That was the response. Shockingly, to some Palestinian negotiators, Trump responds to this and says, great news, Hamas has responded positively, and it seems like they want peace and we can make a deal. So then you had all the delegations descending on Sharm el-Sheikh, and I was told by Palestinian resistance sources who were involved with the negotiations that unprecedented pressure was being put on the Palestinians primarily by Egypt and Turkey. Qatar, I'm told, was a little more neutral and kept emphasizing this has to be a Palestinian decision. But Egypt and Turkey were basically saying, you need to make a deal here. In the end, they also acknowledged it was a Palestinian decision, but I was told there was immense pressure.
So, Dr. Mohammadi, there you heard him say that the pressure that Turkey and Egypt put on the resistance was unprecedented and immense. Based on that, and based on your general observations about the approach that Erdogan and Sisi have taken towards the Palestinians, what do you think their real priorities are here? Why would they put immense and unprecedented pressure and on the resistance to make concessions? And what do you think that tells us about their true agenda?
Well, I think in general, even like the clip that you just played gives a very good glimpse of what actually has happened. But even without that, we know the history of the three countries mentioned and their relations with the Palestinian cause. Turkey has been actually playing a very hypocritical role in the rhetoric, and because the Turkish population actually does demand support for Palestine. They have been, for example, on several occasions have said that they have cut all trade with Israel, but then the statistics come out and you see that nothing has happened and there is no change in how Turkey is dealing with Israel. With Qatar, we saw Israel attacking Qatar's soil and killing people from Hamas and from ordinary people in Qatar, and there was nothing coming from Qatar. What was Qatar's response? They did not even try to save their own dignity. I think it was sheer humiliation for Qatar not even being able to, for example, cut relations with Israel or summon the Israeli so-called ambassador or close their embassies in the occupied land. They have been playing, on both sides. They're trying to maintain their face within the Islamic world, where the public demand for supporting Palestine is significant, and on the other hand, they want to be safe from the U.S. because they have a U.S. base there, which is an occupation base, and they don't really feel that they have the power to resist these, colonial tradition of always, exploiting and plundering the country's resources, and maintaining even a physical military presence in Qatar, which is a very small country because of U.S. interests. So what Qatar is doing, I think they're just doing what a client state does, which is maintaining the interest of the U.S. With Egypt and Turkey, I mean, as I said, Turkey, I think, plays a very hypocritical, Erdogan himself plays a very hypocritical role, because he sometimes has a rhetoric which sounds very much into supporting Palestinian cause because of the public demand that exists inside Turkey. But at the end of the day, he's part of the NATO, and you cannot expect much from a NATO member to go against the will of the occupiers, of the imperialist power that is controlling and maintaining a hegemonic, presence in the region. And in Egypt, I think it's more or less the same. Egypt has never shown independence in adopting policies that meet the demands from its population and show some form of resistance against U.S. ambitions, imperial ambitions, or even Israel. Egypt has always been part of the suffering that has been inflicted upon Palestinians. The way Egypt has dealt with Rafah, the opening Rafah, or the occupation of its own lands by Israel, has always shown us that there's no willpower within the political system to actually resist the occupation. I think Egypt could have played a very significant role in bringing an end to the famine that was going on in Palestine. And Egypt failed to do absolutely anything to bring any ease or any form of support for the Palestinians. And that shows where they are standing. So I'm not surprised.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, it doesn't get talked about much in the West, but the United States has given over $60 billion in military aid to Egypt since 1979. Last year, lobbed another $1.3 billion US to the dictatorship in Egypt. And this is obviously a lot of money for a country that is as impoverished as Egypt is. Hard to imagine how, with that level of dependency on US aid, how we can ever expect
independence.
You're correct, especially from a coup regime, not a democratically elected government, but a coup regime.
Exactly.
So I'd like to move on next to the subject of the Iranian president Masoud Pezeshkian's expression of opinion that, and I think he's now said this several times in several contexts, as have many knowledgeable commentators, that it's only a matter of time before Israel and the United States resume their war of aggression on Iran. And, in promoting this deal between Israel and the Palestinians, Donald Trump said over and over again that this is the beginning of a true and lasting peace in the region. Do you think that the deal between the Palestinian resistance and the Israeli entity has reduced the danger of another war on Iran, or do you expect another attack on the Iranian nation in the not too distant future, despite all of this rhetoric about peace?
Well, the rhetoric about peace actually makes me think that they are cooking something for Iran, because they can't be involved in too many wars at the same time, even though that's how they have been. But at the same time, I think um, I was expecting something to happen in October, to be honest. From like 2 months ago, I've been expecting, based on what I hear from or what I read in the news and I hear from different commentators, that something would happen in October. And I don't think it's been ruled out. I think still it's possible that Israel would starts a war of aggression against Iran, but it depends on how much support the U.S. wants to offer, because Netanyahu cannot do it by himself, and he couldn't last time either. Uh, and by support, I don't mean the annual support that Israel is getting from the U.S. Like something more than that, like the bombing of nuclear facilities in Iran that the U.S. carried out on behalf of Israel, or extra defense capabilities or defense, uh, you know, defense mechanisms that the U.S. has been offering the Israeli regime. But to be honest, at this point, I'm not 100%. I mean, I would never be 100% sure. I cannot predict what's going to happen. It seems like um, maybe Trump is resisting some sort of or doing some sort of resistance against Netanyahu's willingness to get into another war with Iran. But how much he will be able to have an influence on Netanyahu, I don't know. I mean, people are talking about how the Epstein files are behind how much Trump is giving in to the pressure from Netanyahu, and that's still there, and it's not been resolved. So I think if Trump cannot, or people around Trump cannot convince Netanyahu that this is not a good idea, he will get involved in another war, and it will be even worse than last time. And I think the Iranian officials know that, and they are prepared for that. They have said it several times in different comments that they have made in different interviews that they think it's likely, and they are well prepared for it. But I think all of that depends on how much resilience and defense Iran will show, because last time Israel kind of caught Iran by surprise the first night it attacked Iran, because we were doing the negotiations. Nobody was really thinking about a war happening. Right now, I mean, we're at least mentally a lot more prepared than we were before, and I think in terms of defense capabilities, we have had a chance over the past couple of months to renew and revive the things that we lost, the defense system that was heavily damaged, and the radars and different things that needed to be repaired. I think we're sort of we have sort of repaired that, and I think the country is ready for it. But it's definitely not something that we want, and we're hoping it won't happen. But in any case, we're ready.
On the subject of preparations for another possible attack, the Iranian media recently reported that, according to Abolfazl Zohrevand, a member of the Iranian Parliament's National Security Committee, Russian MiG-29 fighter jets had arrived in Iran as part of a short-term plan to bolster its air force, and with more advanced Sukhoi Su-35 aircraft to follow. And he also told domestic media, Mr. Zohrevand, that the delivery of MiG-29s was intended as an interim measure while Tehran awaits the S-35s as a long-term solution, and that China had supplied HQ-9 air defense systems, and Russia had supplied S-400 systems, arguably its most arguably the most advanced air defense systems in the world in significant numbers. That's what Mr. Zodavan said. Now, to my knowledge, neither Moscow nor Beijing has confirmed the reported deliveries. Do you have a view about whether, in fact, this type of aid is being supplied by the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China? Is that something you think has in fact happened?
I think it has happened recently. I don't know the numbers and which of these defense capabilities that you mentioned have already been delivered, but part of it had been delivered based on what I have read in the different Iranian news outlets, because even before that, and then when the war happened, there were talks about how we did not receive, in particular, the Sukhois that we had ordered from Russia, and there was like a delay, and it was giving Russia a bad image inside Iran because people thought that we don't really know what happened. It was like, was it Russia that delayed the process, or was it like it was an ongoing process that was interrupted because of the war? I don't know about those details. But there was this public discussion inside Iran that did Russia and China at all helped Iran when it came to an actual physical war against the country, and it's an invasion of its territorial integrity. So I think that prompted the Iranian government to push like harder for that and get them. And as far as I know, which is based on the news that I have read, part of it at least has been delivered just kind of recently. I don't know if this has been like finished, this is an ongoing process, or it's been fully delivered or not. This is out of my knowledge, and I don't consider myself with any, like, my knowledge regarding the military stuff is next to zero, and that's just what I've been following. And I hope that has happened.
So about 10 days after Mr. Zodavan, the member of Iran's the Parliament's National Security Committee, told Iranian media that Russia was helping Iran with MiG-29s, Su-35s, and air defense systems, President Vladimir Putin held a phone call with the Israeli war criminal Netanyahu. And according to the Jerusalem Post, President Putin and Netanyahu discussed Trump's 20-point proposal to end the war in Gaza, with President Putin reaffirming Moscow's position in favor of a comprehensive settlement of a Palestinian issue. The Jerusalem Post says they also spoke on finding a solution to the Iranian nuclear program and how to achieve further stabilization in Syria. The Post claimed that Netanyahu is also working to quell tensions between U.S. and Russia, which I personally find comical. The idea that the leader of this pipsqueak country, Israel, can resolve the differences between the U.S. and Russia, to my mind, strains credulity. But that's a digression. My question to you, Dr. Mohammadi, is this. What do you think of the Russian government's approach to Israel's aggression in the region? And I'm talking here particularly to the genocide in Gaza and to Israel's criminal war of aggression on Iran. Do you think that the Russian government has done enough to hold Israel accountable for these crimes, or do you think that it has been too patient, shall we say, with Israel?
Well, I think coming from Iran, a country that has paid a very heavy price proudly for supporting Palestine, I think what Russia has done is not enough. But Russia is a different country. It has a different political system and a different outlook on the issue of Palestine. For us Iranians, it's an occupation that must be ended, and it's for the Palestinians to decide what should happen to their country and who should stay and who should not. And Palestinians inside Palestine or outside, Palestinian expats should decide about the future of a Palestinian state. But for Russia, especially with the high number of settlers who have Russian origins that live in the occupied lands, the considerations are very different. So I don't expect Russia act like Iran. But at the same time, I think Russia could have done a lot more for Palestine and even in defense of Iran. But I also understand that it's a dilemma because Russia is involved in Ukraine, and Russia has also, as I said, has a Russian population living in the settlements. And there's inside Russia, the public demand might be very different from the public demand that exists inside Iran. And Russia is trying to gamble between all of these. So I don't think Russia, for Iran, it's a matter of ideology. It's a matter of pure national interest that is embedded in the ideology of resisting oppression, resisting occupation. For Russia, it's not. It's a matter of political interests and geopolitics. So whenever the geopolitics demands Russia to act in a way that may sound like betraying the Palestinian cause, I don't think they have any consideration that would prevent them from doing so. But at the same time, I mean, they're resisting the U.S. as a hegemon, as an imperialist power, and at the same time, they're getting involved with actors that are playing on the side of the imperialist powers, which is one of them is Israel. So it's difficult to say. I would say Russia could have done more, but as I said, I don't expect them to act like Iran when it comes to Palestine.
And I have essentially the same question for you with respect to the People's Republic of China. They don't have to be concerned, the Chinese leadership, of their citizens being in large numbers in occupied Palestine. That certainly is a consideration for Russia. I don't think that the Chinese government has that problem, obviously. And China, as I understand it, is the second largest trading partner of the Israeli entity. So do you think that the People's Republic of China should be doing more, not only to support the Palestinian people, but do you think it should be doing more to support the people of Iran as well?
I mean, yes, I especially with the issue of Palestine, that's the first thing you mentioned, China being the second trade partner with Israel, and that's what came to my mind the first, or maybe look over the past 2 years. I've been thinking, what if China would cut those ties? It would definitely affect Israel in very, very significant ways. And China did not do that. Again, because China's politics is based on economy. They just want to trade with anyone who's willing to trade with them, be it Iran, Israel, the US. And the way China has defined its political system and its political ambitions is mostly around economy and having an economic superiority over other countries. And China is not going to lose or doesn't want to lose to U.S. when it comes to trading with any country, even if that's the Zionist regime. And unfortunately, I would say that's an approach that allows for the genocide to continue when it could have at least been, restricted. It could have been. China didn't even threaten Israel that it would cut ties with the entity if the genocide went on. So again, yeah, it's a different political system. I don't think there are many, or at least there are definitely not as a significant proportion of the population in China that demands support for Palestine as, for example, you would have in Iran. So again, with that regard, China may be acting based on what Chinese people want. But if China also wants to be part of the world, to have more favorable opinions towards the country, I think they should consider the public opinion of other countries, especially in this region. When you are dealing with, Iran or Israel, you should consider the public opinion that exists in this part of the world too, and doing more for preventing the genocide would have done China a much better favorable public opinion in this region.
And I think, in the broader world, I always saw this as an extraordinary opportunity for both the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, to uh, assume the role of moral leadership in the world by
Exactly.
being more vigorous. They didn't have to go to war with Israel or the United States in order to do that. They could have done that purely with diplomatic and economic measures. And I must say, I'm a bit mystified as to why they've squandered this opportunity. Even in the West, I think many, many people would have a much more favorable opinion of the Russian and Chinese governments, despite all of the negative propaganda, if they had taken a leadership role in trying to bring the genocide to an end. And let us hope that they do that in the months ahead. So I'd like to turn now to the question of sanctions, Dr. Mohammadi, against the Islamic Republic of Iran. France, Germany, and the UK have succeeded in engineering the imposition of snapback sanctions under UN auspices on Iran. They did this even though it was the first Trump administration that blew up the JCPOA, the Obama-era nuclear deal with Iran. And on September 29th, the European Council announced that pursuant to the reintroduction of the snapback sanctions, the EU had imposed a broad range of sanctions on Iran, including the freezing of assets of the Central Bank of Iran and of major Iranian commercial banks, a ban on imports, purchase and transport of crude oil, natural gas, petrochemical and petroleum products and related services, a ban on the sale or supply of key equipment used in the energy sector, and a ban on the sale or supply of gold or other precious metals and diamonds. And that's not an exhaustive list of the EU sanctions. What, broadly speaking, do you expect the impact of these sanctions to be? Do you think it will be severe? Do you think it will be modest? Do you think that the Iran now has ways to manage the impacts of these sanctions?
I think there are a few issues to consider with the snapback mechanism and the reimposition of the UN sanctions. The first thing is that China and Russia, at least for now, has said that they're not going to abide by these sanctions and they are illegal and they're not going to consider them when dealing with Iran. And they are the main partners of Iran. China is the main buyer of Iran's oil, which provides Iran with the revenue that it gets. I mean, over the past few years and after the maximum pressure by the Trump administration and the reimposition of the sanctions, which, by the way, the Biden administration also did nothing to reverse. There has been very few like avenues left for Iran to be able to sell its oil and get foreign exchange inside the country or get money in return for that. The second thing to remember is that by now Iran has developed a resilient economy that has managed to first evade sanctions through different means, and second, develop a lot of products inside the country without relying on outside sources. For anyone who travels to Iran, it will be surprising and impressive how most of the markets here sell Iranian products now. This was not the same like 10 years ago or 15 years ago. This is a very significant change. It was painful. It was a very painful and hard path to get to, especially, for example, with medicine. We had patients that lost their lives while Iranian scientists were working on replacing the medicine that they were buying from outside Iran. But at the end of the day, we managed to develop them, and there's always room for improvement. But domestic production increased a lot, and that created job opportunities that sanctions had taken away from Iranians. It does not mean sanctions are okay. Sanctions are killing people. Sanctions are depriving women of their rights more than even men, depriving children of their rights, depriving patients with, very difficult situations of the medicine that they need. And sanctions kill more slowly than wars, but they do kill people. But Iran has resisted those sanctions. It has developed a what we call economy of resistance that has managed to, at least in some sectors, replace foreign products with Iranian products. But being cut away from the global trade system, being cut from the SWIFT, has not been easy for Iran, and it's taken its toll. To be honest, I don't think what is left from sanctions is going to be a lot worse than what we already have. It does not mean the sanctions, the reimposition of sanctions by the UN is going. I mean, it's not significant. It's very significant because so far we have been dealing with the U.S. sanctions, but because U.S. also has unilateral and extraterritorial sanctions that sanction or punishes third countries, third parties for dealing with Iran, we already were cut off from the international trading system. It was not only the US, it was European countries not wanting to deal with Iran. It was India and China having considerations or, in cases like holding back from dealing with Iran because of the consequences that it would have for them. There were exemptions, for example, for India at some point, but even those were not very helpful and then ended at some time. So I think Iran is standing at a point in the history of its economy, where even though sanctions have hurt and are still hurting, we're not expecting a major like an earthquake inside the economy when these sanctions are reimposed. We know that there will be consequences. It's going to make it more difficult than it is, but it's not very significant. It's more, I would say, it's more the psychological impacts that it will have on the market, especially over like the few days that the sanctions are imposed. But after a few days, things will kind of go back to where they were.
And do you expect, based on everything you've seen, in particular Russians comments coming from the Russian Federation and China, that they will comply with the UN sanctions, or do you think that they'll essentially ignore them and continue to do business with Iran?
Based on what they have said, they will continue to do business with Iran because let's not forget that this was the reimposition of UN sanctions and even the UN Security Council holding a session on that. This was all illegal because Iran remained inside in the deal, in the Iran deal, also called the JCPOA. Even after the US unilaterally withdrew from the deal. And how can you reimpose sanctions as an article of the deal where one party has totally left out and nobody else is abiding by their commitments in that deal? So this deal has been scrapped and it's been thrown away. It's been in the trash bin for a while, and then suddenly you decided to bring one article and then activate the snapback mechanism to add to the suffering of Iranians. This is illegal, and I mean, Russia and China have said that they consider it illegal and they're not going to abide by it. We will see it in action, but I think because it will be, in terms of economy and strategy, it will be detrimental for both China and Russia to give in to these sanctions and stop dealing with Iran. I don't think they're going to go. To submit to these reimposition of the sanctions.
And just before the snapback sanctions were put into effect, I believe it was either the Iranian foreign minister or President Pezeshkian said that, and it may have been both of them, that if these sanctions were implemented, that Iran would not resume or allow the resumption of inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Is that the current position of the Iranian government, that as long as those sanctions are in effect, there will be no further inspections by the IAEA?
Yes, there was the Iranian foreign minister had a recent interview just a couple of days ago where he reiterated that we're not going to cooperate with the International Atomic Agency because of the snapback mechanism being activated against Iran. So far, that's the position.
Well, therefore, it seems kind of odd because if the United States and Israel and Europe so concerned about Iran's nuclear enrichment program, why would they do something that would cause the government to end or prevent any further inspections by the IAEA? It's just mystifying. Do you have any thoughts about
Exactly.
that?
I mean, you know that Obama bragged because the deal was done, was reached during Obama's administration, and Obama bragged about how it brought the most severe inspection regime on Iran's nuclear facilities. That's one of the things that Obama was very proud of having achieved through the JCPOA, and that tells you how the U.S. withdrawing from that, as you said, shows that are they really concerned about Iran developing a nuclear weapon, or that it's just another excuse to oppress Iran because it's resisting the U.S. And inside the region, we're the only country that the U.S. does not have a military presence or a military base, for example, or we cut off the hands of the U.S. from the country by overthrowing the U.S. installed dictator that we had, the Pahlavi regime. So is it really the nuclear issue, or is it that you are seeking another way of gaining access to Iran's oil, to Iran's resources, and Iran and as a country again, because that's how you want to keep Israel safe? So yeah, that brings a lot of questions into the curious minds, and I think it shows how the nuclear issue is just another excuse for oppressing Iran. It's the same. It's part of the same white supremacist exceptionalism and the colonialist mentality that seeks to subjugate other nations and um, just plunder their resources and bring them under their control so that they can draw the landscape and set the scene the way that benefits them the most.
And my last question for you is about a different part of the world. I understand you just returned to Iran from Venezuela. I was there last year with a number of people from Iran and from all over the world to act as an election observer in the most recent presidential election. And my question to you relates to the grant of the Nobel Peace Prize to a Venezuelan opposition leader by the name of Maria Corina Machado. Curious about your thoughts as to whether she deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, and if not, why has it been given to her, in your opinion?
I mean, who else has actually deserved the Peace Prize before? Did Obama deserve it? Or did, for example, the Iranian so-called opposition figure, Nagiz Mohammadi or Shirin Ebadi, deserved it? It's always been CIA, U.S. assets that have won this prize. To be honest, I was really hoping that Trump gets the prize, because then we would know for very clear reasons who actually gets the prize. But when it comes to the Venezuelan so-called opposition leader, it becomes a little bit more complicated, because it's more difficult to get over the narrative that has tried to show Maduro as a dictator and Venezuelan political system as a rogue regime. It's usually more difficult if you're not in contact with people from there, or if you haven't visited that country. But let's not forget that this so-called activist and brave lady met with then President Bush of the U.S., and she has worked with the U.S. government over the years, just exactly like the so-called opposition figures. Iranian opposition figures have. I remember she tweeted a few months ago or a few weeks ago that she's very proud of working along with the Pahlavi, who is the son of the ousted Iranian dictator. So that's how it works. You just have CIA assets that pretend to be presenting or representing the Iranian wills or the Venezuelan willpower inside the country, because they're so done with their regimes and they want democracy. But when you read the story of those people, you see how CIA has spent a lot of money, or the U.S. Like Secretary of State has worked with them in order to justify their own public opinion into imposing sanctions on those countries and punishing the same people that they claim they are caring about. So they are punishing the Iranian nation. They are punishing the Venezuelan nation only because they don't want a U.S. puppet in their countries. They want democratically elected, indigenous people in their countries. Exactly what the political systems in those two countries are. So it's just another joke. And I've seen Venezuelan activists on Instagram and Twitter posting about it and being very articulate about it. They do not deny that there are problems in their country, just like the U.S. has a lot of problems with the healthcare system or with even democracy. I don't think Trump represents the intentions and the willpower of the majority of Americans. So who is the U.S. to tell Venezuelans what to do?
Yeah. And I'll just conclude by pointing out to our audience that according to independent media, Machado just told an Israeli television channel, I promise one day we'll have a close relationship between Venezuela and Israel. And she vowed to move the Venezuelan embassy to Jerusalem. So I think that should tell us all we need to know about this Nobel Peace Prize winner. In any case, Dr. Mohammadi, I really appreciate you joining us today. And please do keep safe, especially if there's a resumption of the Israeli war. We'll be thinking of you, and hopefully we can have you back on the program in the weeks and months ahead to continue our discussion.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for this discussion. I hope there is no war, but I would be glad to report on what's happening here if there is one.
Thank you. And we're signing off today from Tehran and Kalamata, Greece on October 12, 2025.